Welcome to the Journal. You have to wonder, once Rupert Murdoch actually takes control of the Wall Street Journal, will he allow the paper's crack investigative reporters to keep exposing the other predators in town? Look at this story in last Friday's Journal. Reporter Ianthe Jean Dugan describes how the pirates of private equity at the Blackstone Group here in New York bought a travel reservation company in Colorado and immediately laid off 841 people. In one swoop, Blackstone and his partners recouped their entire investment in just 7 months, one of the quickest returns on capital for a deal like this ever. Just by firing people, the fat cats made a killing, while ordinary workers in the trenches were buried alive. Dugan tells of those fired workers selling their homes to make ends meet, going without health insurance, making sandwiches and coffee and part-time jobs, while back in New York, the Blackstone chief executive, Stephen Schwarzman, who is worth more than $5 billion, celebrates the Colorado massacre in his 35-room Manhattan apartment. Barbara Ehrenreich has been writing about these issues, about inequality in America, for years now as one of our foremost independent journalists. When she reports, Ehrenreich steps into the real-life shoes of the people she's writing about. For this best-selling book, Nickel and Dimed, Barbara Ehrenreich spent months working as a waitress, a cleaning woman, and a Walmart sales clerk, among other low-wage jobs, and tried to make ends meet for $7 an hour. A recent film, The American Ruling Class, finds her in a diner talking about how the other half really lives.
From the first day I started working here, I've been running. And first I was running around after Gail. She's another waitress here.
Okay, Barb, can you take the pancakes to 63?
It's so much. It's overwhelming. I can't even think about the fact that I may be too tired to get out to the parking lot by the end of the day.
For bait and switch, she went undercover in the disappearing world of the middle class, posing as a white-collar job seeker. Recently, in a departure, she's published a different kind of book, Dancing in the Streets, a history of collective joy. Welcome to the Journal.
Great to be with you, Bill.
You've been writing about it, but The Economist magazine says a growing body of evidence suggests that the meritocratic ideal is in trouble in America. Income inequality is growing to levels not seen since the Gilded Age. America is increasingly looking like Imperial Britain, with a gap widening between the people who make decisions and shape the culture and the vast majority of ordinary working stiffs. I mean, even The Economist says we're becoming a European-style, class-based society.
Well, I would say not a European style, but a third world style. You know, that we are the most class divided of the industrialized countries, the most polarized. You know, we're in a different rank from France or Germany or Britain, where there's actually more social mobility, more upward mobility than there is here. What we're coming to resemble is something more like Brazil, which has always had its wealthy people, and then has extremely poor people.
The first book of yours I read was Fear of Falling, the inner life of the middle class. And that was before the safety net was fraying, the loss of pensions, the loss of insurance, the loss of upward mobility. How do you measure the pain of the middle class in America today?
Some of the things are hard to get an exact fix on. Unemployment is low. And yet you were just mentioning the people laid off. You know, when a hedge fund or private equity firm comes in, takes over your company and decides to squeeze it for profits, right. Those people get laid off, but they get jobs. You mentioned the woman working in
part-time.
She works part-time making sandwiches, probably in the $7 to $9 or less range of pay. Now she's counted as employed, so that pain is not going to show up in the unemployment statistics. White-collar people were being driven out of their jobs, churned out of their jobs by these reorganizations, by mergers, by buyouts. They'll, you know, after a few months, they'll take something, but it will usually be at a lot less pay than they got. The majority of people get laid off, you know, come out at a lot lower pay. But if they get anything, they're counted as employed.
You know, ever since I read Nickel and Dime, I wanted to ask you, how do these women, like the maids, you became one, like the waitresses, you became one, how do they keep going day in and day out?
bills to pay, things like that. I mean, to not see a lot of alternatives when you are just faced with expenses that you have to keep meeting, to keep a roof over your head or to feed your children. And even, I would keep thinking, why don't you look for another job? The typical middle class thing. Well, why don't you look for something better, And then I began to figure out, if you're paid very little, it could be a disaster to change jobs because you might have to go 1, 2, 3 weeks without any paycheck at all. And that's not doable. There was one woman who said something to me that was so poignant. It's painful to repeat. Speaking of her hopes for the future, she said, my big wish would be to have a job where if I missed work one day, like for a child homesick or something, I would still be able to buy groceries the next day. And I thought, yeah, that's quite a hope.
When you write and talk this way, don't people call you a Marxist?
They can, if they, call me anything, but
And the Wall Street Journal says you're trying to stoke a class war. I mean, that's the knock on this kind of reporting,
well,
isn't it?
look, I didn't start the class war that's been going on here. The class war has been coming from the side of the extremely wealthy. It's been happening for a while, but it's a class war which has been very one-sided. Unions are weak in our country. They should be leading, the charge against this. But the squeezing of people on wages and then on benefits, and that's a big thing in the middle class too, that your health insurance package shrinks, your pension is gone, college tuitions are rising, that kind of squeeze. There's just not been enough fight back.
Well, I know you gave the commencement at Haverford, and your last line in that commencement speech in May was, go out and raise some hell?
Yes.
What do we do about it? I mean, what practically can people do about this issue?
Well, I think the first thing is to remember that there are, ways of making change by working together. We sort of lose that idea. Yet this American culture has been full of wonderful examples of people working together. Collectively is the old word, to make change. The civil rights movement wasn't just a couple of, superstars like Martin Luther King. It was thousands and thousands, millions, I should say, of people taking risks, becoming leaders in their communities. The women's movement, it wasn't only Gloria Steinem and Betty Friedan. It was, again, millions of women coming together and saying, we're going to make change here. We're going to march. We're going to demand different legislation.
You have been not only a journalist but an activist. I mean, I've seen you marching with poor people in Michigan and demonstrating with immigrants and others. Why did you decide to cross the line between explaining the world and trying to change the world?
I can't really distinguish these things. If I get incensed about some injustice, I'm not just going to sit at my desk, at my computer all the time. I might want to march out on that. And there's another interesting thing to me. I learn a lot in those situations. A year ago, I was at the picket line of janitors at the University of Miami. And these were, janitors were earning $6 and change an hour. They were on a hunger strike. And I listened to them. I took notes. And that's part of me as a journalist.
A janitor, I understand, is the fastest growing job in America, right?
It is, and that's something to think about when we're told, oh, don't worry about the class polarization in America and the shrinking middle class and things like that. You just have to get an education to get ahead. Get an education to get ahead when the fastest growing jobs have been in things like janitorial services and food services and, home health aides.
Is there any hope that politics in 2008 will address these issues of rising inequality?
I think that it can't be avoided. Even 4 years ago it was easier to avoid. But now we've had so many fairly centrist, even conservative people beginning to blow the whistle of alarm on this. You quoted The Economist. Well, Larry Summers, certainly
former president of
Harvard. Yeah. And an economist. He has begun to say, whoa, there's something really wrong here. It's not just John Edwards and Dennis Kucinich anymore. This is something that, it's too much in our face now.